Hey, welcome back for another episode of Porn Brain Rewired, the podcast. I'm Dr. Trish Leigh. I'm psyched to be here with Coach Zack Carter. Today, what we're going to talk about is what counts as porn. How do you know and what to do about it? And I'm excited because Zack and I are teaming up in a new way today, where Zack, his framework is one of cognitive behavioral therapy, which he will expand upon in a minute. But it brings kind of a new perspective and fresh light to the conversations that I have here. So we're going to kind of spitball and go through we have five things planned for you today. So stay with us for all five of them. Number one, we're going to introduce this topic. Number two, we're going to talk about what counts as porn. We are going to dive into sexual media, actual pornography, and acting out in the world with human beings. I know what you're thinking. Does that really count? Well, we're going to find out. Then I'm going to talk about the brain performance pattern that is running below the surface when it comes to the need to go back to all of these things. Zack's going to bring the perspective of what's the thought system that's in there and what can we do about it. And then, of course, we're going to give you your brain hack strategy for the day. So we've got a lot to do. So let's dig in. Zack, thanks for joining me.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so it's a full plate. It's a full plate, my
It
friend.
is. I'm very excited to really dig in and kind of see what you think about this topic.
Yeah, so I'm gonna start off and introduce it, just this concept a little bit further, because the reason I really wanted to make this podcast and have a discussion about it is because I get this question all the time. And I have to tell you, first of all, wait, before I tell you what I have to tell you, get out your journal. If you're not driving, get out your journal because we have great stuff for you to write down today. If you are driving, conceptualize this, but please take some notes when you're no longer driving. I know a lot of people listen to the podcast while they're traveling. So the thing that I have to tell you is this question is totally a hijacker question. The whole question, what counts as porn? That is the hijacker in you, my friend, trying to justify going back to whatever thing you're going back to. And, if you haven't experienced the sensation within that, this is a hijacker question, you're probably, at the beginning of this journey, but the journey really is one of transitioning from mostly hijacker to mostly your true authentic self who is acutely aware of what counts as pornography. So I just want to open with that. So, we are going to cover even videos on YouTube can be considered pornography that don't seem sexual. We're going to count, social media. We're going to count social media that's sexualized. We're going to dive into actual pornography and, acting out with humans. So here's my first take on it, and we'll get into all the nitty gritty. But my first take on what counts as pornography is it's a why, not what. My first contention is why. Why are you consuming whatever it is you're consuming? A commercial can be pornography if you watch it over and over because all content is so sexualized. Where a commercial will come on, I'll be like, how is toothpaste that sexy? Am I right? Like, you know what I mean? So, like, if you watch that commercial over and over because you're getting a dopamine hit because you like what you see and you're not buying the toothpaste, it's the why, not the what. I'm going to throw that over to you, Zack, and then I'll expand a little bit more on it. What's your notion of, before I go on and on about that, wax poetic, like if you had to say what counts as pornography in one line, your elevator pitch that I have not prepared you for. Like if someone goes, "Oh, what counts as pornography?" What would you say?
Well, first off, if you buy the toothpaste, then it doesn't count. So I just wanted to clarify for everyone who is wondering. It's so funny because we didn't talk about this in advance, and literally what my thought was like, why are you going to it? And ultimately, what the research in cognitive behavioral therapy would say on addictions is that ultimately it's tied to your emotions and like it's emotional control. And so like, why are you going to these images? And that's so same thing. So it's not
Yeah.
about the what, it's about the why. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's not about the what, it's about the why. So this is what I want you to write down, because the hijacker's trying to tell you, like, dude, all you're doing is watching a toothpaste commercial. How harmful can a toothpaste commercial be? That lady on that podcast, she's nuts. It's just a toothpaste commercial. But when you really look at, okay, and I can expand it to yoga videos on YouTube, because I hear this one all the time from people. They'll be like, and first of all, I have to back up. You might not know what I'm talking about if you haven't tried to quit porn. Because if you are still consuming porn, hijackers got free reign. But as soon as you try to quit, the hijacker is going to take you in all kinds of directions to get the dopamine from sexualized media. And a place inevitably that many people land are yoga videos. And, are you really trying to learn a new yoga pose? The answer is no. Like, for most people, it's not about the yoga pose. It is about what your brain is getting to feel good, like Zach said, to give you dopamine so that you think it's so that you can handle your life. Because a dopamine hit takes the edge off of reality, because it's going to kind of take you into an unreality. So, it gets weird. I always tell people, try to quit porn and see how weird it gets. Then you'll know what I'm talking about, the hijacker. Because when you have the thought to go do something that you would never do to get a fix, then you're like, oh, I know what she means about hijacker. Thoughts? Got any thoughts there, Zach?
Yeah, I can't tell you how many guys I talk to who, they go into their softwares on their phone, or they download software to block stuff. And then once you get out the most intense stuff, as soon as life starts to get hard, and you may not even know that that's what it's about. And so if you don't know what that it's about, just as a preface, porn is not the main problem. The sexual images are not the main problem. The main problem is everything that's underneath. It's if you had a hard day at work, or if your girlfriend is leaving you, or if you have a death in the family. Like, that is the main problem. And so that's when you begin saying a yoga video might be fun to watch in this moment, or whatever.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. Or
mhm.
maybe I'll go shopping for lingerie for
Yeah.
my spouse. She could use some new lingerie. And these are the moments where I want you to go. Like, I am not shopping for lingerie. I am looking for a dopamine hit, because I promised myself, or I promised my partner, I wouldn't go back to porn. And now my brain is taking me in this direction. And I just wanted to springboard off of that for a second. Your thought on, emotional regulation. I want to remind you that, our discussions here come with zero judgment, because it comes with the understanding that you developed sexual images for high levels of dopamine as a coping skill a very long time ago when you were young. So when you found porn and it made your brain feel good and it took you out of the difficulty of your life, it became an unhealthy coping mechanism. And I talked about this a few podcast episodes ago, talking about we have healthy needs and we have unhealthy needs. And we have healthy mechanisms to meet both of those unhealthy or healthy needs. Porn is an unhealthy coping mechanism because of all the devastation and damage, not only to your brain and nervous system, but to your life. So it really is about uncomfortable emotions, being able to deal with them with a new toolbox of healthy emotional regulation mechanisms and strategies. Thoughts?
Yeah, and the only thing I would add is that, unfortunately, what ends up happening is maybe you quit the harder core stuff, and then how the hijacker sneaks in is, back in the day when I was growing up, it's the J.C. Penney catalog. For younger listeners, they're like, what the heck is that? Back in the day, they printed pictures of clothes you could buy. You can
Mhm.
maybe see where this is heading. They would have pictures of women selling certain pieces of clothing that were more provocative than others, right? And so you say, like, oh, it's okay to go into the J.C. Penney catalog, or oh, it's okay to watch this video, or oh, it's okay. And so it's not technically porn, right? But unfortunately, the way dopamine works and the way your brain works is that, yeah, you might start there, but then as you get used to that level of dopamine, your brain's going to want the next level, and then the next level, and then the next level, and then you're back into watching porn again.
Definitely. And I was going to name this episode The Slippery Slope. I'm always talking about the slippery slope. And the reason I really like that idea of the slippery slope is because of exactly what you're talking about, tolerance building. So the idea is like, once your brain, once it kind of evens off, you will have to keep going. So I do want to dig into what I promised we would at the beginning of, YouTube videos, social media. How does that become sexual media? How is it related to porn? How does it lead to acting out in the real world? It's exactly what you just said, Zach, is that you might start by looking at women on social media, which is highly sexualized. So keep that why in mind. Or even I like Tate McRae. Like, I think she's great. She's a singer, but on her album cover, my husband's like, "What is she wearing?" I'm like, "Not much, obviously, because she's wearing like fuzzy boots and that's about it." Or even Beyonce. I heard that Beyonce just was the first Black woman who hit the charts in country music, which is really cool. Except for on the cover, she's wearing like a string and two silver cups, like, very sexualized. It's everywhere. So it's so normalized. So now when you go into social media and you're just checking out new album covers, your brain's getting a hit of dopamine, a pretty big one too. Like, especially if your brain is accustomed to look at that in a sexual manner. And I want to make a distinction there for a second, is that you developed a hypersexual lens when you were younger because of continual consumption of sexual media. So then the lens becomes sexualized. But unfortunately, the content is sexual too. So you kind of have a double whammy, a sexualized lens on top of sexual content. It just leads you back for more. Dopamine is the neurotransmitter of motivation, more, and pleasure. It motivates you back for more dopamine where you found the pleasure, and it motivates you into higher levels. And I hear it from men, young and old, all the time. I was just looking at social media, and before you know it, I found myself on porn sites. Then what happens to many people that I work with? That's no longer enough. So they want to take a spin with some of the things they've seen in the screen. They want to experience that in their life, which leads to infidelity, which leads to paid sexual experiences, which leads to dating apps and hookups, because you're looking for an emotionally unhealthy person who's willing to do all of those things that don't exist in a healthy sexual relationship. Now, I know that's a deep dive because that's a lot of information, but that's the continuum that we're talking about here. So, like, that's how it leads to acting out. Because I know if you haven't experienced this before, and then I'm going to throw it over to you, Zach, but this is what happens to people. They call it the narcissistic bubble. So you get into this mode because your brain is using such a dysfunctional pattern. You don't even see that this is what you're doing because you are blinded by the lens and the content. And one more thing before I throw it back over to you, a gentleman who I might have talked to you about this a long time ago, everybody, is that a gentleman reached out from jail and we're making arrangements for me to interview him. He's reached out many times. So if you're listening, friend, if you can listen, thank you for continuing to reach out, because he wants his story not to go untold. He wants to have me interview him to let people know how he landed in jail, because as it was happening, he couldn't see all the bad decisions he was making. And it's a really excellent, not like so far out there story. It is a story that just about everybody can relate to, except for the end point. So you can look forward to that. We're in the midst of getting that scheduled. But the reason I want everybody to know is because this ending isn't so far out there. It's something that can happen because of this continuum. Thoughts?
Yeah, well, and with this stuff, it doesn't even need to end up in jail because you can easily dismiss it and say that like, oh well, that won't happen to me. But there are other consequences that can happen. Sexual dissatisfaction in your relationship is probably going to happen. If you
Mhm.
continue watching porn, if you continue doing this media, the studies show that it's about all it takes about once a month of watching porn to decrease sexual satisfaction in your partner and decrease your how attracted you are to that person. Um, but ultimately it gets back to, are you are you being controlled by your emotions? Like, or are you in control of yourself, and are you in control of your life? And when you're watching porn, when you're looking at sexualized media, when you're doing these things, you are decreasing the likelihood of being in touch with things like your emotions, which are your superpower in order to help you do the things in life that you want to do. So, for instance, motivation, procrastination, these things are tied to your emotions. If you feel anxiety, anxiety says, go get that project done, go get your homework done. But if you go watch porn instead, so you don't have to feel that anxiety,
Mhm.
then you're like, where'd my motivation go? Where'd the procrastination go? So even it doesn't have to, you don't have to end up in jail. You can just end up sitting in your living room, not accomplishing the things that you want to accomplish, or destroying your romantic relationships.
Mhm. Love it. I love it. Yeah. So simplistic. And, that's what we help people with on a daily basis for sure. Like, I love that. That's great. Okay. I'm going to just share briefly because I don't want us to run out of time, but I just want to share that at the core of what we're talking about and what people don't understand is that at the core of anxiety and depression and lack of motivation and that wanting for more dopamine truly is a dysfunctional brain performance pattern that comes from going back to high levels of dopamine in the screen altogether, but especially the more intense the content gets, like when you feel that surge in your brain, that is a high level of dopamine that is desensitizing the D2 dopamine receptors in your brain. So when your brain becomes desensitized, that is what makes your life no longer feel fulfilling. There's not enough dopamine there. There would be dopamine if you weren't desensitizing your brain, but now these receptors are so desensitized, they need such high level of stimulation to feel good. It just keeps bringing you back for more. And I've started calling those two brain patterns. One of them I call strained brain. Strained brain is a brain that's running really fast and really slow simultaneously, or kind of swinging back and forth like a pendulum between them. And basically, it makes you feel anxious, it makes you feel overwhelmed and exhausted, which is the dangerous combination that pushes you back into the screen to take the edge off of anxiety and to give you that, self-soothing and self-stimulation. That's strained brain. If you do that long enough, you will desensitize your brain so much that you feel drained because you've artificially shifted yourself into this numb state and you're staying there because you're so desensitized. That really leads to lack of motivation, general malaise, which is that feeling of depression without the mood stuff, but just like blah, like I can't go do my life. There's no motivation there to do it. So there truly are dysfunctional brain patterns at the core, but we know that using neuroplasticity, you can in fact, resensitize the reward center and heal these brain patterns. And it doesn't happen overnight because someone in the ED program that I offer now, this desensitization leads to ED. So of course that becomes a wake up call for people. But someone emailed that he wants his money back because the program didn't work. And he just got done with it 2 weeks ago. So, and I'm going to make him a video. This isn't it, but just I'm going to make a video that if you've been struggling with ED for years, and you take a program it's a short program, it takes a week or two, and 2 weeks later, that's why we have 90 days as the bar. And 90 days is actually probably a starting point, not an ending point. So, like, it does take time for your brain to heal. Don't give up. You have to keep resensitizing and stop desensitizing. And that's why we're here. So maybe you could kind of talk about what if you're um to springboard off of the brain pattern that's underneath, maybe you could talk about what that feels like from a thought system standpoint and what CBT is and kind of, how you help in that regard.
Yeah, sure. So, CBT stands for cognitive behavioral therapy. I don't know if we've discussed exactly what CBT is. First off, what I do with guys that come to me with Dr. Leigh is not counseling, it's coaching. But there's a thought system that essentially says that you have behavior, so what you do and what your body does. You have emotions, and so that's your feelings, and then you have your thoughts, and that all of these interact together. And so oftentimes guys come to us and say, just tell me what to do. Okay, so that's in the behavior category. Just tell me what to do. And we can offer them things to do, but if they don't fix their thought processes or they don't fix what's going on emotionally, then they don't recover as fast. Why? Because it's only a third of the problem that they're trying to cover. So, yes, when we talk about like, yes, please stay away from watching shows like Game of Thrones and stay away from social media and stay away from porn and stay away from all these things. But if you have underlying hurts, underlying emotions that you're not dealing with, underlying stressors, loneliness, anger, whatever it is, you have to deal with that in order to prevent you from doing the thing that we're talking about, where you're searching around on YouTube for porn alternatives.
Mhm.
The same with your thought processes. If you have negative thoughts about yourself that consume your mind that you haven't worked on, you have to begin working on those thoughts. Because if you say I'm a failure, I'm always going to be a failure, or I'm an addict. Well, if you call yourself an addict, you give yourself permission to be an addict.
Mhm.
So the system says, hey, here are the three things I need to work on. It's not just what I do, but also how I'm thinking, my thought patterns, and also how I'm feeling.
Mhm. Yeah, I love it. And what the way that I talk about it very simplistically is that, or I guess maybe not that simplistically, is that when your brain is regulated, you can feel your emotions, which then allow you to have some clear thoughts. And then you go move into the world, you approach and engage and use healthy behaviors to do what you need to do to take care of the feelings that you're having, especially negative feelings. That's when your brain is regulated. When your brain is dysregulated, it's very difficult to do that. It's, I would say I would feign it impossible actually for most people. So, what we do in coaching is we reverse the feel, think, act, and we do the act, think, feel, but it's to get people moving in the right direction. So, when we say go do these things, there are scientifically proven strategies to have people act in a new way. Go act in this new way. It's going to lead you, if you engage with it, it's going to lead you to new thinking, which is going to lead you to feel your feelings, and you're going to realize uncomfortable feelings are uncomfortable, but they are not going to kill you. You don't need to self-soothe them. You can sit with them. And then when you do that, you're like, oh, I do feel awful. So what I have to do is go do my project. Just start it at least, so that then I can keep moving forward and then I can act in that new way. So I try to have people do the act, think, feel to get them to be able to feel, think, act. Take a dysregulated brain pattern, help them regulate it by giving them the tools. So, the premise of everything that I do is cognitive behavioral therapy in nature. But the reason your coaching is so important is that's a lot for a person to glean, also. Like I've always loved the idea of meta. If you go to school, you have to read meta analyses. Meta, and not now, Facebook's taken meta as a concept. Meta means your own, like metacognition is your own ability to think about your own thinking. It's self-awareness. It's like your own ability to reflect and look at yourself, very low when you have a dysregulated brain pattern. And so, part of it is increasing that ability. And that's what you're there for. Because if someone comes and says, wow, I'm thinking about, hooking up with my friend, that way I don't use porn. People ask me this all the time, by the way. I'm thinking about just hooking up with this girl. That's better, right? I'm like, no, that's not better. That is an absolute hijacker idea. Because if it's not intimacy and you don't actually care, and it's not that vulnerability in that piece, like that's not healthy sexuality, that's just unhealthy sexuality acted out. not, using a screen. So, that's where if someone says it to you, you can say, why do you need to do that?
Mm.
And just one more thought, and then we can move on unless you have another idea, is that the way I think about it is you're trying to change your thought system and to learn how to feel your feelings with a very distorted thought system that doesn't allow you to feel your feelings. Like, it's literally using porn and having a strong or even a moderate or even a mild porn habit. It is designed to prevent you from feeling your feelings and thinking your true thoughts. So you are trying, unless you get into a program or you have a coach, you're trying to change the very thing that this habit is disabling. So that's why it's so difficult to gain headway by yourself, which is why we offer the variety of programs we do.
Well, and if you're open to it, I can actually give everybody a strategy for the week on your idea of meta that could really
I
help
love it
them.
because we were moving into our brain hack strategy. So I would love that. That
Yeah.
would be
So
perfect.
you already encouraged them to get the journal out. So
Mhm.
let's grab your journal. So you're like, what is this idea of meta? This is kind of hard to kind of like grasp on. So here's what you can do. So like take a thought that you have about yourself. And so let's say I'm an addict. So we've already said that one. So let's say I'm an addict, okay? Write that down in your journal. I'm an addict. When you do that, that thought is a part of your whole being, right? That is what you are. It's like in your DNA. I am an addict. Okay? That's step 1. Step 2 is I'm thinking I'm an addict. Okay, so now we're moving it from your very core, your very DNA, and now it's moving into your brain. You're noticing that like there's a thought there that I'm an addict, okay? That's step 2. I'm thinking I'm an addict. Okay, then the last step, step 3, is writing down I'm noticing that, I'm thinking that, I'm an addict. Okay. And that step 3 is moving from in your brain to kind of going into this third person, like almost above your body, above your head. You're kind of looking at yourself from above, right? I'm noticing that, I'm thinking that, and that I'm an addict, right? And so what that does is that helps you to see this in a very meta way, right?
Mhm.
Above what's going on. And so then you're able to say like, oh, well, maybe this isn't a core of who I am. Maybe this is a thought process that I need to fix.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, I love it. I love it. And then if I could take that one step further to really punch people in the right direction this week, and I've been doing this myself in a different way, I'll tell you in a second, is that once you look at that, once you can take a step back, if you're able to get to that, and you have that phrase, I'm an addict, how can you change that to, the third eye that's kind of looking down is like, that is a person who's struggling with a behavior. Like if you depersonalize it, you're like, I'm not an addict, because an addict makes it is a core feature of you, where we all struggle with lots of things. I'd love for anybody to find me one human being on earth who doesn't have a struggle. If you find that human being, please email me because we all have struggles. So this is, and I believe the biggest struggles we have are the biggest lessons we're being offered to become better people and to take this personal transformation journey. So instead of saying I'm an addict, take a step back and say, I'm a person struggling with something. And then you could even take another step back and go, I'm a person who's choosing to become a better person. I'm listening to this podcast because I want the tools. And in our 90-day program, I always tell all the guys in the meeting, I offer a monthly meeting. I'm like, you're the top 1% right now. I've been reading research studies, and there's studies that just say this is going to be epidemic. The way that this just takes a lot of people down cognitively, mentally, and physically in 10 to 30 years. Screen time in general, porn specifically. And I'm like, you're the top 1%. You're in a program working on this. Top 1%. So you're here on the podcast. We'll put you in the top 5% because you should get into the 90-day program, right? But the idea is like, you can say, I am taking this opportunity Yes, I'm using it loosely, taking this opportunity to become a better person. And then now you've just flipped that whole thought process on its head. And I've had to do it. I'm in a different location because I yet have more work to do in my home. So the other day I was walking around going, going, this house is trying to kill me. And I'm always talking about how language is an extension of thinking. So when that comes out of my mouth, I'm framing myself in a very poor way. So then I started saying, my environment can't hurt me. And then I'm like, that focuses on hurting me. So I'm literally like reinforcing, even though the can't is in there, I'm reinforcing the fact that my environment might be able to hurt me because I'm trying to talk myself off the ledge. So then I started to say, my environment is safe. And so then I'm walking around going, my environment is safe. And my husband goes, forget the environment. Your immune system is strong and you are invulnerable to anything around you. And I'm like, you nailed it, my man, because like I was putting external onus of control. When I go my immune system strong and there's nothing that can hurt me, like I just took that whole thing and shook it up on top on put it on its head. And you can do the same thing. That's how CBT can be so powerful, but it's difficult to get there. I've been practicing this stuff for a lifetime, and I find a weak moment when I get bad news. Like, I'm back to my environment can't hurt me, but I love it. It's so powerful. And then when you get to that, I'm like, you know what? We're going to do what we need to do. And I'm going to be so much better for it in the end. And I'm going to have the most amazing house. That's the lemonade out of lemons. And that's how you really take CBT to the next level. So, wrap up thoughts.
I thought that was great. I'm good. Yeah, nothing else.
Yeah. So get your journal out, do what Zach asked you to do or suggested. And then if you can flip whatever negative thing you're struggling with into you're strong, you got this, and you're going to use it to become the best version of yourself, which does not include the hijacker. It only includes your true, authentic self. So, on that note, we will see you next week. And until then, control your brain or it'll control you. I'll see you then.